Welcome to Chandwell. My name's Michael and I've been adding dormers and chimneys to my hotel ballroom building's roof. So here is Scratch Building a Victorian Hotel Part 13, Reach for the Sky. I printed the components for the dormers which would go on the Mansard part of the roof onto sticky label. These were incredibly small and this would be a fiddly job. I cut out the face. I used the sticky label technique to make the window and then mounted this behind the aperture on the dormer face. The sides were next. I knew the angle of this triangle would be correct as I designed it against the roof in Inkscape on the master drawing. It was just a case of using tweezers and the scalpel to help me get these tiny triangles positioned. Against the Lego brick, it's easy to see the size of this component. To prevent seeing the roof tiles behind the window, I just coloured the back of the glazing with a Sharpie marker. The roof was next. I used my usual no maths approach to getting the roof face correct. I've never made one this small. I finished off by using strips of Scale Scenes roof tiles. Any historic photograph of Bradford Forster Square features the wonderful tall chimneys of the Midland Hotel. I had the dimensions and shapes of the chimneys on the original drawing that I showed way back in part 1 of this series. Looking at my own photos too, I was keen to represent something of the ornate nature of the chimneys. To that end, I came up with a design that comprised 17 different elements per chimney. There were 6 1mm thick base layers, 4 stone texture wraps, 2 1mm thick capping pieces, 2 further stone wraps and 3 chimney pots. I started by printing the base layers and sticking them onto 1mm card. Once cut, I had a little kit of parts ready to assemble. I glued the base layers into pairs to make them 2mm thick. The plan is to have a central rib which extrudes ever so slightly beyond a recess in the upper 3/4 of the outer layer. I wrapped the outer faces and the edges of the inner rib in stone texture. Because the outer faces have varying width, I took care to get the wrap fitted in sections whilst keeping the face itself in one piece. Once the outer face was glued to the inner rib, the widths differ by less than a millimetre on each side. The effect really is subtle, but I was hopeful it was going to work. I glued the third element to the pair. The end result is not exactly like the prototype, but it gives a nice N-scale nod to the original. I wrapped 2 capping pieces in stone texture and then glued these to the top of the chimney. I'm really happy with the elegant result. My idea of sandwiching an inner rib between 2 outer pieces seems to have really worked out well. The joins towards the bottom actually look okay too. I took care to ensure that the mortar course is lined up across those joins, and I think that's helped. The actual roof seems to be an ever so slight different angle than how I designed it. This meant that the chimney was not exactly straight, but a quick rub on a nail file sorted out that issue. I needed to ensure that I got the pair of chimneys level and central on the roof. I cut a piece of card to the same width as the space between the chimneys on my original design. I clamped this to the chimneys with little clamps. Then, when I put the whole structure on top of the hotel, I could be sure that the chimneys were positioned correctly and that they are the same height as the other tall chimney on the entrance building. I used a metal engineer's square to check that they were level, as well as to hold them in place as the glue went off. All that was left was to chop up a cotton bud into 5mm long bits, paint them a terracotta colour, and glue them to the hotel. As with the other 43 chimney pots on my layout, they're not perfect and they're not straight, but that all adds to the rundown charm of Chandwell. This part of the build took me 3 hours at a cost of just over 20 pence for 1 scalpel blade and a sheet of sticky label. Everything else I used was offcuts from earlier parts of the build or was rubbish lying around the house. The total build time is now 143 hours and the total cost is £23.90. If you're interested in how I designed the hotel from the initial drawings, then this video is the one you want to look at. This one gives a bit more information about the way I make the windows. On to the next building now, and another tympanum. So until that video, thank you for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you then.